Max's Adventures Through Time, Learning History Firsthand. Once upon a time, in a cozy little house, there lived a curious and adventurous child named Maximum. Max loved reading books about history and often dreamed of what it would be like to travel back in time and experience life in different eras. One night, as Max was drifting off to sleep, a bright light shone through their window. Max got out of bed to investigate and found a glowing portal that had appeared in their backyard. Without hesitation, Max stepped through the portal, and before they knew it, they were transported back in time to a different era. Max looked around and saw that everything was different. The clothes people were wearing were old-fashioned, and the buildings looked ancient. Max realized that they had traveled back in time and was thrilled to explore this new world. And so, Max began their exciting journey, where they would learn firsthand about the history of the world and the people who lived in different eras. Max looked around in wonder as they explored the new world. They saw people riding horses, wearing corsets, and carrying old-fashioned lanterns. It was like stepping into a storybook. Max decided to approach one of the people they saw, an old man sitting outside a cottage. The old man looked up and smiled at Maximum. "Hello, young traveler," he said. "What brings you here?" Max explained that they had traveled back in time and was eager to learn about the history of the world. The old man nodded understandingly. "Well, you've come to the right place," he said. "This is the era of the Renaissance, a time of great artistic and scientific discoveries." Max's eyes widened in excitement. They had studied the Renaissance in school and couldn't believe they were actually there to experience it firsthand. The old man offered to take Max to a nearby market where they could see some of the famous artists of the time. Max eagerly agreed, and they set off together. As they walked, the old man told Max stories about the famous artists and thinkers of the Renaissance. Max was amazed by the stories and asked many questions. Finally, they arrived at the market, which was bustling with people buying and selling goods. Max saw a group of people huddled around a man with a paintbrush in his hand. The old man explained that the man was Leonardo da Vinci, one of the greatest artists of all time. Max was thrilled to see da Vinci in person and watched in awe as he painted a beautiful portrait. The old man pointed out the intricate details and explained how da Vinci used light and shadow to create a sense of depth. As Max watched, they realized that history wasn't just something they read about in books. It was real, and they were experiencing it firsthand. Max spent the rest of the day exploring the market and meeting other famous artists and thinkers. They saw Michelangelo working on a sculpture, Galileo demonstrating his telescope, and Shakespeare performing a play. Max was amazed by everything they saw and heard. They had never felt so alive and excited. They couldn't wait to see what other adventures awaited them on their journey through time. As the sun began to set, the old man led Max back to the portal. "Remember, young traveler," the old man said, "the past is a treasure trove of knowledge and experience. You must take the lessons you learn here and apply them to your life in the present." Max nodded thoughtfully. They knew that they would never forget this incredible experience. As Max stepped back through the portal, they found themselves back in their cozy bedroom. They crawled back into bed, feeling grateful for the adventure they had just experienced. As they closed their eyes and drifted off to sleep, Max thought about all the amazing things they had seen and learned. They couldn't wait to see where their next journey through time would take them. The next night, as Max was falling asleep, they felt a familiar tingle in their body. They knew that the portal had appeared again and that it was time for another adventure through time. Max quickly got out of bed and made their way to the backyard. As they stepped through the portal, they closed their eyes and braced themselves for the unknown. When Max opened their eyes, they found themselves standing in a lush green forest. The air was cool and fresh, and they could hear the sounds of animals all around them. As Max walked through the forest, they saw a group of people gathering around a small fire. The people were dressed in animal skins and were cooking meat over the fire. Max approached the group and introduced themselves. The people were surprised to see someone dressed in modern clothes but were welcoming nonetheless. They explained to Max that they were members of a tribe of Native Americans who lived off the land and respected nature. Max was fascinated by their way of life and asked many questions. The tribe invited Max to join them for a meal, and they sat around the fire, sharing stories and learning about each other's worlds. Max was touched by the warmth and hospitality of the tribe and felt a deep connection to their way of life. They knew that they would never forget this incredible experience and the lessons they had learned from the Native Americans. As the night grew darker, Max knew that it was time to return home. They said goodbye to the tribe and stepped back through the portal. As they crawled back into bed, Max felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to experience different eras and learn about the history of the world. They knew that these adventures through time would shape who they were and who they would become. The next night, Max was once again visited by the familiar tingle in their body, and they knew that it was time for another adventure through time. Max stepped through the portal and found themselves in a bustling city. The streets were filled with people, and Max could hear the sounds of horses and carriages. As Max explored the city, they came across a group of people protesting in the streets. They were holding signs and chanting slogans, demanding equal rights and justice for all. Max approached one of the protesters and asked what they were protesting against. The protester explained that they were fighting for the right to vote and be treated as equals, regardless of their race or gender. Max was inspired by the passion and determination of the protesters and knew that they had to help in any way they could. Max joined the protest and marched alongside the others, holding a sign and chanting for justice. They could feel the energy and excitement of the crowd and knew that they were making a difference. As the protest came to an end, Max felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. They knew that they had played a small part in the fight for equality and justice. As Max stepped back through the portal and crawled into bed, they knew that this adventure through time had taught them an important lesson. They knew that they had a responsibility to use their voice and their actions to fight for what was right and to make the world a better place. The following night, Max once again felt the familiar tingle and knew it was time for another adventure through time. Max stepped through the portal and found themselves in a grand castle. The walls were lined with tapestries, and the air was filled with the scent of roasted meats and fragrant spices. Max explored the castle and came across a group of knights preparing for battle. The knights were armored and mounted on horses, their swords at the ready. Max asked the knights what they were fighting for, and they explained that they were defending their kingdom from invaders who sought to take their land and plunder their riches. Max watched as the knights rode off into battle, their banners flying high in the wind. The clash of swords and the thunder of hoofs echoed through the castle walls. As the battle raged on, Max felt a sense of fear and excitement. They knew that this was a dangerous and violent time, but they couldn't help but be swept up in the thrill of the moment. After the battle was won, Max spoke with the victorious knights. They explained that although they had won the battle, there was still much work to be done to maintain peace and protect their kingdom. Max realized that even in times of war and conflict, there was still a need for diplomacy and compromise. They knew that they would never forget this important lesson. As Max stepped back through the portal and crawled into bed, they knew that this adventure through time had taught them the importance of bravery and sacrifice, but also the value of diplomacy and compromise in maintaining peace. The next night, Max felt the familiar tingle and knew that it was time for another adventure through time. Max stepped through the portal and found themselves in a dark and eerie forest. The trees were gnarled and twisted, and the air was filled with the cawing of crows. As Max made their way through the forest, they came across a group of people huddled around a small fire. The people were dressed in rags, and their faces were drawn and gaunt. Max approached the group and asked what had happened. The people explained that they were survivors of a great famine, and that they were struggling to find food and shelter. Max was moved by their plight and knew that they had to help in any way they could. They shared their food and blankets with the group, and listened as they shared stories of their struggles and hardships. As the night wore on, Max felt a deep sense of empathy and compassion for the people in the forest. They knew that they had been incredibly lucky to have been born into a time and place where they had access to basic necessities like food and shelter. Max vowed to always remember the struggles of those less fortunate and to do what they could to help others in need. As Max stepped back through the portal and crawled into bed, they knew that this adventure through time had taught them the importance of empathy and compassion, and the need to help others who were less fortunate. The next night, Max felt the familiar tingle and knew that it was time for another adventure through time. Max stepped through the portal and found themselves in a bustling market square. The air was filled with the sounds of vendors hawking their wares and the chatter of shoppers. As Max explored the market, they came across a group of children who were working in one of the stalls. The children were dirty and tired, and their faces were lined with worry. Max asked the children why they were working, and they explained that they had no other choice. Their parents had fallen ill, and they needed to work to make enough money to buy medicine and food. Max was saddened by the plight of the children and knew that they had to help in any way they could. They bought all the items in the children's stall, and then gave them a bag of food and some money for medicine. The children were overjoyed and thanked Max profusely. Max felt a sense of happiness and fulfillment that they had never experienced before. As Max made their way back through the market, they noticed that many of the vendors and shoppers were looking at them differently. They realized that by helping the children, they had inspired others to do the same. Max felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. They knew that they had made a real difference in the lives of those children, and that they had inspired others to do the same. As Max stepped back through the portal and crawled into bed, they knew that this adventure through time had taught them the importance of kindness and generosity, and the power of one person to make a real difference in the world. The following night, Max felt the familiar tingle and knew that it was time for one last adventure through time. Max stepped through the portal and found themselves in a quiet meadow. The sun was shining, and the breeze was gentle. As Max walked through the meadow, they came across a group of people who were gathered around a large stone. The people were dressed in colorful clothing, and their faces were filled with joy. Max approached the group and asked what was happening. The people explained that they were celebrating the summer solstice, a time when the sun was at its highest point and the days were longest. Max joined in the celebration, dancing and singing with the group. They felt a sense of joy and happiness that they had never experienced before. As the celebration came to an end, Max realized that they had learned so much during their adventures through time. They had learned about bravery and sacrifice, empathy and compassion, and kindness and generosity. They knew that they would never forget these important lessons. As Max stepped back through the portal and crawled into bed, they felt a deep sense of gratitude for the experiences they had had. They knew that these adventures through time had changed them forever, and that they would carry these lessons with them for the rest of their life. As Max drifted off to sleep, they knew that they had experienced something truly special. They had traveled back in time and learned about history firsthand, and they had come away with important lessons about bravery, sacrifice, empathy, compassion, kindness, and generosity. Max smiled as they drifted off to sleep, knowing that they would always remember these adventures through time and the lessons they had learned. They knew that they would use these lessons to make a positive impact on the world and to help those in need. And so, Max closed their eyes and drifted off to sleep, feeling happy, fulfilled, and grateful for the experiences they had had. They knew that they would always treasure these memories and carry the lessons they had learned with them for the rest of their life. And with that, it's time for you to close your eyes and drift off to sleep, too. Good night, and sweet dreams.